Welcome everybody to Kindred Project. We are back
and excited.
Should I say we're back, or we're acting like we never took a break?
Nah, we're back. Yeah,
Okay, we're
we've been
back.
here for
Back
a little
at
bit.
Okay.
Back at it again.
Okay. Welcome everybody to Kindred Project. We're so excited. Stop. Okay. I'm holding it so ugly.
No,
okay.
It looks great.
My finger was like this.
The claw.
Okay. Welcome everybody to Kindred Project. We are back. Joe, Gabe, Soph. We're here. We made it. We're back, and we're gonna chat and we're gonna talk about some things. And we need to catch up though.
Yeah.
Life needs some catch up.
Life
needs some catch up.
What has life been looking like?
Go ahead.
You've been talking this whole time. You're like,
No.
your turn.
Tell her how life's been looking. I'll
Tell us, Soph. Tell us.
Soph makes a mean cup of coffee. A mean cup of coffee.
I do make a
Gabe is like
it's just
zoning.
water in a shot of espresso.
Oh man.
But how's life been? What's new? There's been a lot going on, like in the media and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But
Talk
as far
about
as,
it. Talk about it.
Talk about it. It's
You got
crazy.
Will and Chris.
smacking each other.
Oh
in
my
public.
gosh.
That was insane.
That was a crazy.
You got
and-
TD
oh,
Jakes
man.
speaking on it with Denzel.
I know Denzel.
Denzel,
It
TD
was
Jakes
like a
was
whole
talking
cultural
about it.
shift.
I was like, what happened here?
I think they're at like a leadership conference, and then they're like, "What's that?" TD Jakes.
Yeah.
TD Jakes was like, "Oh, like tell us what happened."
Yeah.
And for like 4 minutes, Denzel just tells him the whole story.
It's insane.
nuts.
Insane.
Insane. Like you literally have TD Jakes, the bishop,
The bishop.
Yeah.
speaking on it.
I went down a rabbit hole in TikTok.
Really? Oh
Yeah.
my God. What did you find?
I think everything that everyone else found, but I didn't even know it happened. I don't watch
okay.
award ceremonies. Like I don't watch any of that. And so I saw it on TikTok. I'm like, this is a joke. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I keep seeing, like, I saw like a montage of him slapping him a
yeah,
few
yeah,
times.
yeah.
And I was like, no way. And so going down the rabbit hole of like Jada and like the fact that she has, what is it?
Alopecia?
Yeah, having alopecia. Cause I was like, why did he like switch so quick? So I just wanted to know things.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
talking about like, there's so many things from like black men protecting black women
Yeah.
to like, we don't condone violence to like, you know, talking about black women's hair. And I was like, just going down this huge rabbit hole.
Dang.
And yeah, it was a crazy event.
That was crazy. I love Will Smith.
I know.
By the way, I have so much love for Will Smith.
He
Like,
raised us.
Literally,
Yeah.
he raised us.
Yeah.
Like he's all of our big brother.
Yeah.
You know, like when we watch Fresh Prince, like on repeat
Yeah.
growing up, like he was literally all of our big brothers.
Yeah.
So I love him so much, and to see that happen was pretty sad. I don't
Yeah.
know all the ins and outs to
Yeah.
the background of the story, but
Yeah.
sometimes, and I feel bad because sometimes, like when you go on TikTok, you'll see people like somebody took like his line, his one-liner, get my wife's name,
Yeah.
name, and they'll do like a remix
turn into a
to,
trap
Yeah,
beat?
they'll make
Oh
it into like a
my
beat or something like that.
gosh.
And it's funny, but then it's like, oh, like he's a
This poor
man.
man.
He's like a human with feelings, and I love him, and I just like,
You're
ah.
so nice.
You know what I'm saying? That's how I feel deep down. Because
He's
I'm
a
like, man,
man.
I always have this like this deep sort of sense of like things that dehumanize people.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, like this
Sure.
just makes like fun of a guy who has like real deep rooted problems
Wow.
and feelings. And so
That we don't know about.
Yeah.
it is funny on the surface. And I laughed, but then I'm like, oh man, like that kind of sucks because he's done so good for so long, and now this one
I
thing
know.
has so many people talking about him in so many different
And
lights.
then he won the award.
And then he won the award.
He like
Yeah.
goes on to have this like amazing moment.
But
Yeah.
now the Academy is debating. I don't know what the status is of today, but the Academy is debating on whether or not they should take it.
Oh
from
my
him
gosh.
Because of
This
the
is his
incident
first.
that happened.
No,
This is his
don't
first
take it
award,
from
and I
him.
think first and only award,
Yeah, it is.
that he has, and so
Dang.
But King Richard, that's what he won the award for. He
Wow.
was amazing.
I never saw it.
incredible.
But I saw a lot of things about it.
Yeah.
It was
he
awesome.
did. It was like literally like every minute has you on the verge of tears.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was so beautiful, so well done.
Gabe, have you ever had to like stand up for Sophie's honor before?
When I first saw that video, and this is so not the thing that I should be saying on YouTube, but literally when I saw that video, I was like, I would do the same thing. Because
You would have slapped him?
I wouldn't slap him. I'm joking. I'm
Yeah.
But,
Sorry,
yeah, I would definitely I've never come into one of those situations, but something that we talked about was for men, and this is an actual genetic thing, when men feel protective, literally within them, when tension arises or something like that, adrenaline kicks in.
Sure, yeah.
And their body gets physically warm, their heart starts physically racing.
Crazy.
And they just kind of see red. That happens instinctively. Yeah. That's why when guys and girls, for example, when couples argue in relationships and guys get heated, they don't say anything good. But women can keep their composure and actually continue to articulate themselves.
Confrontation.
Wow. Yeah.
It takes, I wouldn't say every guy, but it takes a lot for a guy to get to that place where they can still keep themselves composed.
Interesting.
When they are angry.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so a lot of guys refuse to get angry and respond differently to anger.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is I don't not understand why he responded the way that he did. Wow. Was it right? No, but I can understand where it came from, why he responded that way.
Yeah.
What else has happened in the world? What else do we need to catch up on?
Did you guys watch the HILLSONG documentary?
I did.
Oh, yes, we did.
Gosh. Did you guys watch the whole thing?
We did.
We watched all 3 episodes.
I only watched the first episode.
Yeah. We watched the first one. And we're extremely frustrated.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
We could sit on this for a little while. I don't know where to start. I have no idea where to start.
I know you recently just watched it.
Yeah. Let's start maybe from I don't know. We're not gonna talk through each episode, but I think it really is very. It's so shocking and it's so jarring, especially people like us who are kind of still kind of in this world a little bit and have very, very deep roots in mega church or just Pentecostal church. And it was very uncomfortable to watch the whole. Yeah. And I don't even know if I'm going to finish the other 2 episodes. The first episode really made me sick.
I was going to ask, after watching the first episode, let's kind of start there. Yeah. How did you feel? What was your response?
I felt so sick, dude. I felt so just sick to my stomach. Number one, that I feel in some ways I kind of, I don't know, played a part in kind of a similar culture, but then also feeling sick of just feeling very defensive of the church, extremely defensive of how we do things and worship and just other themes that it has brought up, and sharing the gospel, all of those things are very sacred to us, and then so to hear people who have been extremely hurt by the church, which it is extremely valid, their experiences are valid, their feelings are valid, but just to have a lot of people who've been hurt by a specific church come and probably get paid to just speak about their worst experiences about the church is just it's really intense.
It is.
Yeah. It's really, but also too, we have been extremely hurt by the church as well.
Yeah.
We've been hurt by the church, but we're still in the church. We still love Jesus. Yeah. And, but we've never, we've never been approached to make a documentary about things, but I've never felt the need to go and expose anything to anybody, I've never felt the need to do that,
Yeah.
So it was just really intense to sit through some of those people's testimonies, I guess, their experiences, but
I feel that
it's rough.
I think I remember specifically after watching the first episode, I had such a hard time saying yes to watching the second 2, because deep down in my mind I was if I watch this, whoever produced this, I don't want them to get my money. I don't want them. That's literally what I thought.
That's literally exactly what I thought too.
That's literally what I thought. And I will say this: I think the reason, because I felt the same way, where I felt very defensive and very on edge watching it. I would say in episodes or in the second and third part of the docuseries, they do share a lot of really sad truths, facts that have been like documented. But I think specifically the reason that I got so defensive through the whole thing, but mostly within the first episode, was because to me, it felt like there was a lot of people sharing just kind of their opinion on the church from a very hurt perspective. From a very hurt perspective. And when you share and that you have the right, cinematic music, and you have, like little clips of what other people have said out of context, you can paint this real picture of someone who seems so malicious. Right. And so I don't know. By the end of this docuseries, I would say this: we don't know every single fact, right? Because what we have seen, even the truths and the things that have been documented, we see the outside, but at the exact same time, we don't see the heart. The Bible literally talks about how man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And so people like Pastor Brian Houston, Carl Lentz, like these men are going to be people who answer to God when they go to heaven, when they go to eternity. And for that reason, I can't judge them or dehumanize them. Like we talked about earlier, I can't dehumanize them and paint them to be this malicious person when I don't know the full intent of their heart, and nor should we like skepticize on it. Nor should we Kit Kat about what we think their intent was. And so as much as it was important, I think, for this documentary to bring to light some of the truths that were shared, I think it could have been, in my eyes, seen as more reliable of a source if there wasn't so much opinion shared about them as well.
That's really interesting. I think it's like important for us to say too, like the whole abuse side to it. I haven't watched those episodes about like when it comes to, Frank Houston and his abuse. Like clearly, look, we believe that that's wrong and that's evil and that's like not okay. But I don't think that like in this podcast, like we are really going to speak on it. So like if people are watching thinking that we're going to speak on like the sexual abuse part, then like we're not going to talk about it. That's like that's like a whole other thing.
Definitely.
Totally. But like these big themes that is brought up that all three of us can really speak to. I think it's important for us to like have the conversation. So what were you going to say?
I think not knowing the audience really, like, are we talking to the non-believers? Are we talking to the believers? Are like, who are we talking to? Are we talking to hurt believers, like people that are hurt by the church? And even seeing from all three perspectives, I still don't get why, like, I don't understand what they were trying to teach, like I see that they tried to bring light, but even in the first two, I was like, if I was a hurt believer, you're just making me more upset, and as from being hurt, by people, because I think that I want to rephrase in my mind, me personally, this is something that I'm trying to take. I want to rephrase like being hurt by the church, because I understand the church is the people, but I think when, especially me growing up before being a part of the church, I heard people being hurt by the church and I thought they were hurt by Jesus. But no one in that documentary is talking about how Jesus, his teachings hurt them, how they destroyed them in any way or their family. Like we weren't separating families like you'll see in like Scientology documentaries and stuff like that. Like no shade on Scientology, but you know what I mean?
Actually, all shade on Scientology.
But I was scared even beforehand too. I was like, are we going to make this like a Scientology documentary? Are they going to talk about how we separated churches?
In the first one?
He said it. And I was like, no,
like I can't go here.
No, like that's not correct. Like please do not compare something so different from this. So
from that point on, everything else that man said to me was invalid.
I know.
A lot of people, they said things that I was like, invalid. Like you quoted scripture and said that it was something a pastor said all the time and didn't quote the scripture. I was like, invalid. Like we're not talking about that. But to before watching this, was really scared about that. But back to what I was saying too, like I want to continue to say, like, I've been hurt by people in the church, because though I know the church is the people, I think people outside of church, when they hear church hurt, they think the the Bible itself. Like, you know what I mean? Like what we believe was hurting people.
Sure.
And people themselves can take scripture and twist it and turn it and create kind of these churches that we see now where people are coming in and having an experience and leaving like the same, you know? So all that to say, like I've experienced hurt from people in the church, and I still was like, what are we talking about here? Like I would watch it and be like, that's incorrect. And I'm getting upset. And I'm like trying not to because we're watching it with our friends. But I'm like going back and forth with the people on TV. I was like, invalid. I don't know what you're saying. And I'm like, I get it. Like, I don't want to say invalid because I want to validate people's feelings. Sure. But for you to say an opinion as a fact.
Okay. Feeling and opinion as fact.
It's not the same. Right. You know, it's not the same. And they were talking about worship and how worship is manipulative, and they're like they would sing songs, and I'm not trying to get upset about it, but I love worship. Like, you know, don't like I love worship. And they were talking about how they would sing new songs on a Sunday, and that was manipulative. And I'm like, I listen to new songs every day. Am I manipulating myself? Like I want new music coming out all the time. And they would talk about how people would cry based off of a chord progression. And I'm like, I understand how music can be manipulative, and I think all music is manipulative. You put eerie music behind someone talking, or like funny like bells, and you're gonna think that this person's gonna say something stupid. So music itself can be very manipulative. But to say that people are crying because of a chord progression and not the words that they're singing out and believing in their heart, I couldn't get behind some of that stuff. That was
hard.
Because it's like, I think we know, being in the church, being hurt by the church people, I want to say, but I was still very confused. I'm like, what are we trying to get at? And even to the very end, I was like, okay, here's factual information, but you haven't told me what you think the church should look like. You've just continued to tell me what you don't like about it. And so there was no resolve other than like, there's hurt people in the church, and we get that. But what now? You know, what do you leave people with in stories like this?
It just kind of ends with like, here's all this information, deal with it.
You know,
it's like, now do with it what you will.
And it's like, go to a church that might be okay.
No, like I agree. Like there's no targeted like perspective that they're trying to share, except one that seems super negative. Like it seems like a bash on the church because it brings all of these hurt opinions and all of these negative facts, and it's just like, now do with it what you will. We're not telling you what to think, what to say. There was no reconciliation of like, these are things that have happened, but you know, there's still hope for the church. It just left you feeling pretty hopeless. And I'm like, I'm in the church, I love the church, I'm a part of the church. Our channel's called We Are the Church. And it leaves even me as a viewer feeling like, so we're just like hopeless. Like, so we're just gonna end just like this.
And that was a big part of episode 1, right? Like, you've seen episode 1. Episode 2 and 3, I do want to say that like people's feelings should be validated. And that's not like, I think what we're saying too, it's like there was a bunch of negative facts, and it's not that they were incorrect facts. In like chapter 2 and chapter 3, there's documentation we see, like they were showing like things like handwritten notes and like videos and like and audios of things. And so it's not to say like, I just, you know, because I love the church, I'm not going to believe any of this stuff. But as far as like when people were talking about the church and the college that they were going to, like, I understand those feelings, and I think those feelings should be valid, and I think that those things should be taken to court. I think that when you have been like assaulted, like even like victims themselves, they come back years later and people are like, oh, well, that's not valid because that happened when you were younger. I think these things should still be brought up, right? But it just was like fact on fact on fact, and then like it ended at some point, and I was like, what? I just feel so gross. I feel like I just watched something that happened to somebody, and like now there's nothing I can do about it. What was the point of me watching this if I can't help at all? So
what do you think are some bad habits of the church? I think like this documentary like has brought up really important themes, even if like the themes are hard for like us three to like confront. But I think also that's kind of the point of documentaries too, is like to make you uncomfortable and to like pose this question, like, is this the best way to do church? You know, is the way that Hillsong, or is it, you know, the way that mega churches do church, is it the best way, you know? And of course the whole thing brings up a lot of negative themes, but like, what do you guys think are some bad habits that you're seeing, just like overall, are overarching, maybe, not just specific to the documentary?
I think this is something that you've touched on a little bit before in other conversations that we've had, which is something that we see kind of play out in the Hillsong documentary, which is that for some reason, in the context of a large-sized church, for leadership, a lot of times it feels like the outward perception of me, my outward social life, is more important than my inward personal life.
Yeah, your public world versus your private world.
Versus your private world, exactly. Yeah. And I think that is definitely something that we've kind of, you know, experienced, and a lifestyle that I've lived, where I thought people's perception of me is far more important than my perception of myself, than my own just like relationship with God and all of those things. How people view me, my public appearance, is far more important than my own personal, like, true health. And I think that played out, like we talked about within the documentary, for sure, with Carl Lentz, which is one of the hardest topics for me. Was Carl Lentz, because I remember the day where I found out about his affair and everything that happened. My dad told me when I came home from work one day, and Sophie came over later on that day, and we're just sitting together, and I like bawl my eyes out. I'm crying so hard, because the truth is, and even to this day, in spite of what anyone else feels about this, like, I have so much love for that man. I don't condone the things that he did. I think that what he did was sinful and wrong, and that there has to be repercussions and circumstances that follow up with that. But at the same time, I have so much love for him, and the messages that he's preached, I really do believe really helped to structure a lot of my young faith. Because I started, you know, following Hillsong and, you know, all of these really awesome, you know, like church leadership formats when I was 16 years old, 15 years old. And so the music that they would release, the messages that he would preach, really, you know, kind of shaped me as a youth. And I don't feel like my faith is tainted because of the mistake or the sin that he has made, or the lifestyle, this choice that he decided to do.
That's good.
I love him, and it makes me really sad to see his kind of downfall in a sense. But I think that's just, you know, the Bible talks about how that which is done in the dark will always be brought to the light. It's important for us to make sure that the shadows of our world, you know, kind of the crevices that not everyone sees in our world, are pure, because those things will be seen by people at some point. And so, to tie it all back together, I think that's a big mistake that I think the church can learn from, is, hey, make sure that you're doing well for yourself in your home, with your marriage, with your kids first, with your relationship with God first.
Totally.
And from that place, let there be a byproduct of fruitfulness in your church, in your leadership.
Wow. Yeah, that is so good. Soph, what about you?
Bad habit, something that I've seen, is like, we have really put pastors, like the gift of pastors, on a pedestal in the church. And we've talked about it with mentors, and I'm not going to say this is my idea, because first of all, it's from the Bible, and secondly, a mentor brought this to us, and I thought that this was so good, so I've just taken it as my own. But he talks about the fivefold ministry, and how the fivefold ministry really needs to come back, because we're seeing it is the prophet, pastor, teacher, evangelist, and
prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher. Wait. Evangelist, apostle,
prophet,
evangelist,
apostle.
There you go.
Yes, and so we've taken pastor, teacher, and we have said this is the head of the church, and we need all fivefold, all five of these people in ministry in the church. And so I think we just don't see enough of everything. And he even was saying too, like, and I'm of course still in the process of doing like research. It's just kind of came to us. And because I'm just so used to pastor teacher, like if you want to be in ministry, you're going to be a pastor. You want to start a church, you better be a pastor. You know, like that's just like how it works. And so when he was talking to us, he was talking about like it's so important to have all five. And it makes so much sense because even if you're thinking about like a prophet, like somebody that is super prophetic, like they're going to be like deep in prayer for you. And if there's anything off, they're calling it out. Like they're calling it out and they're like, you know, this is not correct. Like, you know, you need to have all those people, all those personalities, people that are looking to grow the church, you know, because the pastor themselves can totally be that. Like you can have a pastor essentially somebody that's running the church that has all those things. And it doesn't mean like coming into the church, you just need to have one. But I think that's something that's kind of lacking from the church is that we take pastor, teacher, or like teacher, like somebody that's really good at like teaching and we call that a pastor. And it's like just because you have the gift of teaching and preaching doesn't mean you have pastoral abilities to really sit down with people and talk to them. And we saw that too in the documentary as well. And, you know, I also love Carl Lentz and I love all pastors. And to me, my heart breaks every single time that I see that, whether you hear it more about like the pastor themselves, like the husband and the relationship than you do the wife. Doesn't mean that it's not happening on both ends, you know, and it's really sad to see. But with that, like they were talking about how he would preach and then leave, you know, and not sit down and have conversations with people, or like in his conversations with people, they weren't very pastoral. Like he was kind of sitting and teaching and not really sitting and listening when somebody would come to him with sin. And so I think that's a big part of what the church is missing. Like we do not have all of that, or we have one person trying to be all of that and can't do it successfully. And I think that's a big part of like the church model that lacks, but yet we have not figured out a good model because we're either small mom and pop or we're like this, you know, supermarket mega church. And I haven't seen a good system in between yet that I could get behind for like what the church is supposed to look like, you know? So I don't know.
There was a guy who also reviewed and kind of shared his opinion on YouTube. His name's Ruslan. He does like a lot of different like responses to Christian media and things like that. And he was talking about Carl Lentz, and he was saying how he feels like Carl Lentz would have been a really good content creator or like inspirational speaker kind of thing, and not necessarily a pastor. And so what I hear you saying is like the importance of like when it comes to your gifting, right? Like you should operate in that. And instead of being a pastor of a church with an evangelistic bent or an apostolic bent or gift mix or things like that, like you should be an apostle, or you should be an evangelist, or you should be a teacher.
It's like understand. It's like
but there's no place for that.
And it's like you're putting. I have now this responsibility to understand my own gift. I've taught on that a little bit. Like, I like something that my heart desperately needs from me is to commit to understanding my gift. It's no one else's responsibility.
It's true.
It's not my staff's responsibility. It's not my assistants. It's not my ministry leaders. It's not my team leaders. It's my responsibility to understand. And that requires accountability, and that requires development, you know?
That's true.
And so
that's super
true.
It's
really interesting that whole topic of like, of maybe where we have seen like somebody in the pastor role who does not operate in the pastor office. They operate in the apostolic evangelist office, and how that actually does damage to the body. When I don't have a sound like understanding of my own gift, and I am in a role that is like having me operate in something that I don't possess. Like, how is that affecting the whole?
Right.
How is that negatively affecting the whole, you know? And like, even with the whole Carl thing, like I also, he has totally shaped a lot of those young years of my faith. And, but yeah, it's like such an interesting topic of like, was he not a pastor,
Right.
Right. And is that possibly why we're seeing these kind of discrepancies like in his reputation and in just the way that he did ministry, because he wasn't a pastor, so is the expectation off? The people that I feel like have hurt me in my life, I've placed them in roles that they are supposed to be a pastor. But if they're not a pastor, then my expectation is kind of like invalid, I'm expecting something out of you that you just do not have the capacity to give me. But that's also damaging me, that's hurting people. So it puts such responsibility on people who very much, like, if you are in any type of role, like whether in the secular or in ministry world, where you are responsible for people's development, it is so important for us to be in our integrity, and be in those boundaries. And I saw something on social media over the last week that like was just so whack, people making up accusing people of made up words. And this person is in positions of leadership where they are responsible for developing people. And I'm like, you have no idea how just you spouting off like your thoughts, your opinions, like that's not Bible. You're spouting off opinion, and you're accusing people of like these literal made up words. Like how irresponsible and damaging, and divisive. Like I'm like, it puts such a responsibility on leaders to be in our integrity. And that speaks to understanding your gift. If you're not something, then stop operating in it, and let like somebody who is actually operating in that office like step up.
Totally.
It's so dangerous. I feel like
true.
And I think that like we as human beings, the pattern that, and you guys can speak to this too, tell me like if this is incorrect or not, but like the pattern that I see in humanity is that we really do we love titles, like we love a good title, and even like a title of, this is like off of church, but like a title of mom or dad, and that person and or parent does not act as a mom or dad, but because they have title of mom or dad, you have these expectations of what that's supposed to look like, and same with like pastor, like you're saying, like even leader, like if you have identified and now have a title as a leader, and then you are going out and you are saying these things, you got to realize that you are leading people. Even if you're like, I was just saying my thoughts, you're leading people in a way. They see you as that title, as a ministry leader. And so it's so important. You're right, there's a lot of that's such a great point. There's so many layers to that too, because I think that some people, like specifically with the person I'm referencing, and right now, this person like loves the title, and because it's human nature to want to take the credit for things, right? Totally. Like I want the credit, but I don't want any of the accountability of that title. I want all the credit. Like I want all the praise. I want all the high fives. I want everyone to love me. I want everyone to like me. I want everyone to follow me on Instagram. But I don't want to take accountability for when I say my thoughts on an Instagram post and they're extremely dangerous. And then you're following it up. Well, I'm still unpacking this. Girl, like there is a responsibility that title, whether you like it or not, holds. And the more that we keep on saying, I want all the credit but none of the accountability, people's lives we're bulldozing through people's worlds, like leaving a wake of people in our trail, And this is totally speaking, my experience is a leader that has gotten it wrong a lot of the time. I had to learn. I came onto a team where we inherited a huge
youth group, and I was extremely young. My leaders at the time took so much risk on bringing me onto the team, and it was amazing, but I had to learn a lot of those things really kind of on the job. You know, like
sure.
when I was going to Bible college, like I think we've talked about this too, like there was no college course on like how to lead a meeting, how to moderate a meeting, or like how to have tough conversations. That was not a Bible course that I took. And I was like 21 years old, trying to figure out my own stuff, like also being a leader. I got it wrong so much, and I hurt a lot of people. And we were talking about this in Gel last week, that I have to, because I'm a leader, that makes me responsible, right? Whether I like it or not, it makes me responsible. And I, as a leader, have to hold space to be accountable to those things.
Totally.
I have to hold space to be accountable. But if like I'm just like living my life, like I want all the credit, but none of the accountability, it's just tough.
No,
it's tough. If you don't like it, get another job.
I get it. I recently had
just recently.
I'll stop you if I need to.
It's a good cut. So like if we need to cut it out. I recently cut this whole thing out. I'm learning how to be a leader. And so I recently had an interaction where I had to sit down and kind of like, own my stuff. And it's interesting because for as long as I've been a leader, I feel like I've never been sat down and had a conversation like I have recently.
Really?
Yes. And because I don't know what it is, but I don't know if there's like an expectation of me now that I'm married to the campus pastor. You know what I mean? I'm like, is there a different expectation of me now? A different level of leadership, And I'm not aware of that, right? But now I am. I'm very much aware of it. And even like in the way that I constructed myself, I know I hurt somebody and it sucks. It sucks so bad when you have to sit and like listen to somebody and be like, I hurt your feelings. That sucks so bad. And I now have to like apologize. And I don't like being the person that hurt anyone's feelings. And so in the moment, of course, it's hard because you're like, I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to do that. That wasn't my intention, you know? But I truly get that. Like there's such a responsibility to that. I just don't think we understand. And maybe because I didn't have to hold myself accountable in the past. I didn't have opportunities where if I hurt somebody, like we had to sit down and talk about it. Or like even had the opportunity to sit down and talk about it. Like I've had experiences where, people have had feelings towards me and it wrapped around the entire church and came back to me. And I tried having a conversation and we couldn't have it. And even to this day, I still haven't been able to have that conversation. And it sucks. But you're right. Like being a leader means like even owning it. So if you want to be a leader, it's not just like you get a badge, you get a different color badge and you get to lead. You get all access and you get to lead meetings sometimes. It means, you have to sit down and somebody had hurt feelings towards you because you just thought you could say whatever you want. But you can't anymore.
But you can't
anymore.
You can't.
Which I'm still trying to grapple with. And I would really want to hear your guys' perspective on like leadership in the church, because this of course is like a little bit newer to me. You guys have been in this for a long time, being on staff and being on the front lines and people seeing your faces a lot and having hurt feelings. But how do you feel like those difficult conversations, like how do you navigate those? Do you have them? Do you not have them? Do you just own everything and let them kind of move on? What are the repercussions? Like how do you navigate it?
Have you ever hurt someone's feelings before, Gabe?
I hurt someone's feelings every week.
Really?
No, you don't.
I feel like I always
it is
hurt
every
people's
single
feelings.
week.
I feel like I always hurt someone's feelings. I'm like, I'm sorry. No, that's not true. But
you gotta, you as a leader, you have to get comfortable with that language though. Like I have to get so comfortable with humility. I have to be so comfortable with like apologizing. I have to get really good at apologizing.
For sure.
Something you need is humility, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And I think the biggest thing too is like people in moments where you hurt someone or like where I've hurt someone, I think the biggest thing for me is like I really want to like, because a lot of times people will come and I mean, not every time, but most of the time when someone comes to you and you find out from someone that you've hurt them in some way, shape or form, you're entering into a situation where somebody is hurt, obviously, and you have to navigate those waters in a really good way, you know, because at that moment, if you are a leader to somebody, you are responsible to the best of your ability, exemplify Christ, exemplify Christ-like leadership. Totally. And so for me, the biggest thing is like, I'm always hyper aware of like, I'm not going to be angry. I'm not going to retaliate. I'm going to be honest, and I'm just going to speak truth in love. And so if something happened on their end, I'll communicate that. But I also want you to feel, to me, the biggest thing is I want you to feel loved by me by the end of the conversation more than anything else.
Yeah, that's
typically
you're so good at that.
When it comes, thank you for saying that. Typically, when it comes to any confrontational conversation, that's like my ultimate end goal. For anyone who wants to know what's Gabe thinking when he's going into this conversation, it's almost always, I just want you to know that you're loved by me more than anything else. Yeah. And that moving forward, you're going to know whether you want to be close to me or not. You're going to know Gabe loves me.
That's so good.
That's so good. And that's hard to do.
It's so hard.
You're so good at that. Because sometimes, like, if somebody were to come to me, or if, like, say we have a little tiff and you tell me how you feel, I leave. Now I'm upset. You know? Now I'm mad that you thought that I was mean, you know? So that switch, you're so good at that. Because, like, I could come to you with something and you're like, at the very end, I'm like, I know he loves me. Like, I just feel so loved by you. And people say that too. A lot of people say that, like, if they come to you with anything, they feel so loved by you. But that's definitely hard to do. It is. How do you feel like, is that easy for you to do? Like, is it easy for you to just love him through it?
No, my style, that's so like true to like Gabe's core value as a person. I feel like just hearing that, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Because no, I'm like, that's your core. That is like literally your core value, you know? But I feel like my core value is so different. Like for a lot of those meetings that I've had and I had a lot of them. I've had a lot of those meetings.
You probably had more than I had.
Definitely. For sure. And it honestly, because our core value is different. So my core, like one of my core things is that I don't want you, like I want you to feel loved, but I also want you to know that I'm right. Like I'm right. And so I don't want you to feel so loved that you forget that I'm right. Okay. Because in this conversation, I'm right. And I had I had an excuse to do what I did, or I had a reason to do what I did, you know, right, like intentions. It might not be right, but I was in my rights to do what I did. Wow. So when I had meetings where there was a lot of accountability for me, and especially too working like with one of our best friends, Dre, who was also like he was my peer on staff, and he also has just a very different like set of core values. Yeah. Like, and so Dre and I working so close together, but being so different, I had that permanent layer of accountability with Dre, where Dre was constantly, and in love. I mean, like we were all best friends, you know, it was like never like a malicious thing, but Dre was always that person for me, letting me know like, you got that meeting so wrong, Joe. Wow. Like literally I remember, and if Dre ever watches this video, like he's totally going to remember this. We had a meeting in the growth track room where I felt like I came off really strong because I felt like I was right. I didn't want you to feel loved. I wanted you to come in knowing that you were wrong, and I wanted you to leave knowing I was right. So I conducted that meeting. I was the leader in the meeting. I conducted it. That person walked out. I was high-fiving Dre. I was like, that was great. And Dre is like, Joe, he literally used this language. I'll never forget it. He's like, you are losing it. You need to call that person and you need to apologize.
He said that?
He literally said that. And I love that. It was like it was like a wrecking ball through my ego. Because not only was I so puffed up because I led this meeting and I made sure but then, you know, like I felt like the meeting ended fine, you know, and it ended well. Wow. And this person, you know, submitted to my leadership or whatever. I don't even really remember honestly what the issue was, but I just remember feeling it went really well, and immediate feedback from Dre. Like we didn't even put the chairs back, and Dre's like, that was not it. That was not it. You thought that was it. It was not it. Wow. And so it was harder for me to learn confrontation. It was like harder for me to learn integrity, but it was harder for me to learn like my title means that I'm in a role that means I'm responsible for people, and that means my integrity, the standard for my integrity has to be in a different sphere than everybody else. Yeah. It has to be. That's amazing. And then it goes on to like the idea of like when it comes to confrontation or whatever, like reacting versus responding. I think I hurt a lot of people because all I did was react. And at the time, I had like Dre, who was a lot more of like a calculated thinker. I was more of an emotional communicator, and he was very calculated. He like still is. We all know that he's like that. He can never make a decision. He always is just like he has to think everything through so that he makes the best decision. And I'm so grateful looking back on those early years of leadership that I got to do ministry with a friend that had just such a different brain than me. Because I think it really saved me, and it saved a lot of people on our team. For sure. But yeah, it was really different for me to learn that, but it was hard. And there were people that left the church because of me. There was people that left the church because of how I handled similar conversations to the one that you just had, Soph. And again, I have to hold space to be accountable to those people. Totally. And it's not fun, but no one ever told me it would be. No one ever told me it would be fun to have accountability or to be developed. It's not fun to be developed, but I understand now, all of those conversations, all of those meetings were for me to develop, and for my development. Like even in the conversation that you had, I got to be in that conversation directly, and we had a conversation. And I was just like, let it drive you to self-reflection, because I also was that person that would leave those meetings and again just puffed up and very ego driven, and I wouldn't allow it to drive me to self-reflection. And so it just stayed there. Just stays on the surface of my heart, and and then that makes my heart hard, I don't trust people, and I don't like people, and I'm just gonna be this abrasive leader, and I don't really care what people think. But if I let it drive me to self-reflection, then that turns into development. That turns into transformation. That turns into the leader that I really want to be, refinement. Refinement. Yeah. That's such a good word.
That's so good. And I love that you had, Dre. And that's why I think it's really important for all leaders. I think that's just a value that everyone should have. It's what I grew up on, becoming a leader is always to have another person in the room for accountability. But then even for moments like that, I left and I was all like, Jocelyn, please tell me what I did wrong. Afterwards I was like, I want to make sure that with leaving, I know that there was ups and downs, there was good parts and bad parts. There's a lot of feelings and emotions, but with stuff like that, I love that you had Dre to turn to you and be like, that was not it. We're going to run that back because that was not it. Yeah. And I think all leaders should have that. And that's really important, is to have accountability, because as we can even hear too, us as leaders, I love your guys' leadership style. And, we've said things to each other that's hurt each other's feelings as friends. And so I can only imagine in leadership, the many people that we have hurt as well too. Yeah. And I know I've had, I think maybe other conversations that I can't think of right now. But I've had conversations where I've hurt people. Actually, I've had a few. Now that I'm thinking about them, I've had a few repressed memories. But I've had a few conversations, and you guys have had a few conversations. And it sucks to think that when we watch documentaries like this, these people that were hurt maybe didn't have opportunities to have a second meeting or a third meeting, and they leave feeling hurt. Like you said, people have left feeling hurt. Yeah. So on a lighter note, if somebody were to make a documentary about your guys' ministry, what would they say?
Oh
Our
gosh.
ministry?
Yeah, about your time in ministry, being a leader.
I don't even know what that means.
It would be a mess. But it would be fun.
Would you watch it? Would you watch it?
Oh
Because
my
in my
gosh,
mind,
I was
all I
thinking about
think is
that
like,
too.
is Carl Lentz watching
No,
this?
I was thinking about that too.
If
Or
somebody
if
had a
like I wonder if
documentary.
like some staff is like on the low watching it, but like
I
you know
would be.
not saying it,
Yeah.
or
I
like
would be.
or what if they had like a staff meeting where they said like we don't want anyone to watch it? I would do that too.
Would you make your staff not watch it?
I don't know.
like publicly? There's pastors who were once a part of Hillsong who have explicitly is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
Like out loud towards the public, let people know because of everything that's happening, I'm resigning and starting my own church. People have literally said
Wow.
that.
Yeah, there's one guy in Texas.
Bro,
Yeah, Texas or somewhere in the South. Yeah,
that is a whole thing.
That's a
That's
whole thing.
interesting.
yeah.
That's real interesting.
Because they were like a plant, and they were or like a startup, and they were like, it's too hard to start a community with all of this drama, so we're just gonna start our own church.
Okay. That
I don't
triggers
know
me,
what my
but
documentary would be like.
I know. I feel like mine ministry now is very different than ministry pre other situation. Like my ministry before, I feel like I was this light and bubbly and fun, and now I'm just like this reserved and like isolated.
no,
No, you're not.
stop.
Just a little different. It's a little
you're
different.
not.
I'm slowly coming out of the cocoon. I've been scared to come out for a long time. I'm going back in
at all.
I came out and was like, no.
Oruquita and mariposa
Dos orejitas.
Oh my gosh.
coming out.
Sorry.
As a butterfly.
Wow.
Coming out as a
Okay.
butterfly.
No, you are a nurturing, incredible leader that people look up to and are inspired by.
But I've hurt people. I think I'm a passionate leader. We're passionate
all
leaders.
figuring it out.
I think we're very passionate leaders. Because when you were talking about your style of communication,
Yeah.
since I haven't had that many, I feel like I have been that person. Like I could think about an experience where I was like very direct with like the way that I felt about something, and I thought that I left that conversation and they felt loved by me, and then later on they didn't talk to me, and I was like, never mind. So sorry, I'm not gonna do that ever again.
Gosh, yeah.
That's how our documentary would go. So
Yeah.
a bunch of people would be like interviewed about like all of us, and they'd be like, I think they're figuring it out.
yeah.
Yeah.
I say that to everybody. Like I'm figuring it out.
I
like
think
we're
they're a
all
work in
figuring it-
progress.
Yeah.
They're the hot mess
Yeah.
express.
Oh, Gabe, he's figuring it out. He'll get there.
I would hope people would have that much grace, you
I
know?
know, yeah.
And I think that is a big part of church hurt is that, and I can say that because I have been it where I haven't given leaders grace, and I wanted them
Yes.
to be so perfect. And then later on, once you hurt somebody, then you realize, and it sucks that it has to come to that point, but like really once you hurt somebody, do you realize like, dang, I wish they would have given me more grace? And it's like, well, I'm for sure going to be giving my leaders way more grace.
Yeah.
Wow,
I think that's what
sure,
people will
yeah.
hear from us a lot when they hear like our response to the Hillsong documentary is like, we have so much like love for the church. Sorry, I can't.
Gulp, 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 gulp.
I know you're gonna hear that like ASMR.
I didn't hear it. I was like,
I know.
You hear the ice like.
I know. I'm
She's
sorry. I was so
swirling her
thirsty. I was doing that earlier, and I was like talking, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I shouldn't have done that. Sorry."
When Joe tried to hold it down, she was like, yeah, Gabe.
So good.
I'm just sipping it and staring.
Oh my god.
Sorry.
Yeah. Eka close to both the mics.
I'm like, dang, bro, back up off me.
That was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Mid talk, the disrespect.
Oh
Sorry.
gosh.
Continue.
What I
That
was
was
gonna
so
say-
rude. I'm so sorry.
So good.
What I was gonna say was that I feel like those who are watching our response to the Hillsong documentary, they'll recognize like that we have a lot of obviously frustration with the sin that's taken place in the church, but also too a lot of love for the church and a lot of hope for the redemption of the church.
Sure, that's great.
And so my question, maybe we can close out with this conversation. My question to you guys would be, for those who are looking to us, because we're talking about leadership, right? And this is the reality that a lot of people are looking to this platform and the three of us to answer some questions as leaders of like, how do I respond to something like this Hillsong documentary, right? Because it's so open-ended, they don't give you any sort of resolve. So for those who would ask you that question, like, what am I supposed to do with this information? Like, think of like the young people that we lead, those who, you know, hold our voice to a high value. What would you say, like, this is how you should respond to this kind of situation, this documentary?
Go for it, Jocelyn.
I would say, number one, two things. I would say two things. Number one, have a genuine relationship with the Lord. That is your foundation for everything. Your relationship to the church is not your relationship to the Lord. Those are two different things.
Good.
Come on.
They are not mutually exclusive. Soph did a great job like talking about like she has to differentiate for her own healing. She has to separate church with like people in the church. She has had to make that intentional healing or intentional decision for her healing.
Yeah.
And I think people moving forward, we have to get smarter than that. Like we have to get smarter to do the same thing, right? Like my relationship with the church does not equal my relationship to God.
It is good.
And the people that have lived through these bad habits, as we called them earlier, and their faith has survived are because they had a genuine relationship. Those that their faith didn't survive, may not have had, I can't define them, but may not have had the most genuine relationship with the Lord. They may have had a relationship to the church, which is not all in and of itself bad. You know, we want people to have a healthy relationship with the church, but that doesn't equal, you know, my real genuine relationship to the source of my faith.
Absolutely.
And then the second thing I would say is pray for your leaders. Like, pray for your leaders. It's like the most powerful thing that we can do is to pray, be safe people for our leaders, and pray for safe leaders. We can be safe people for those people, but also that they would be safe and that they would be integral. Pray for your leaders. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, that is so good.
That is good.
Even like a part that you had said, you were talking about, like identifying the relationship with like people and with Christ. And something that I think that kind of really upsets me too is like, I'll even see it. I don't know why I'm on like hurt TikTok, but
sometimes I get those videos too.
Yeah. And like, I see a lot of even like church hurt from, that's like, I think church trigger. What is it? There was like a hashtag that was going around and I saw a lot of it, like church trauma.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So a lot of people were talking about it, and I'll see like quotes that are said, like quotes of like people saying things like, oh, I was hurt by the church and now I'm restoring my relationship with God. Like I'm working on my relationship with God. And I'm like, that's two different things.
It's two different things.
Like it's two different things. Like, please do not identify the fact that people hurt you with the fact that like, because God didn't do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like they might have taken scripture out of context, but like you returning back to God, like you should have always been if you had that relationship with him, right? You know?
And that also speaks to like knowing the word for yourself.
Yes.
You know, I think we talked about this maybe in a different conversation too, of just like your pastor is not like, it should not be the only, like the sole source of where you're hearing the voice of God.
It's true.
You know,
it's so true.
That gets weird too. So if like, I need to learn, I need to know the word for myself.
It's true.
I love that. And I think like, another thing that I would say as well too, you brought this up when I was having a really hard time in my healing journey, and we sat down at a coffee shop and we talked back and forth about it, because I was having a hard time with like God being just in my situation, and he's like, should God be just or should he give grace? Like, and I was like, for me, I want him to give grace. You know what I mean?
But then for everyone else,
mercy. We were talking about mercy and like, is he a merciful God or is he a just God? And I was like, I think he's both. And he's like, all right, but in this situation, what do you want him to be? I was like, obviously just. And he's like, what about mercy? And I was like, I don't think it's appropriate. You know, I don't know if mercy is appropriate in this situation, but I have to, I would even say that too for other people that are going through, hurt by people, whether it's in the church or out of the church, like knowing God, knowing that he is just and is merciful, and being able to accept both. And when you can have that perspective, you could pray for your leaders,
sure.
right? Like, God, I pray that though I don't understand it, I don't understand your mercy. I don't see what you're doing behind the scenes. I know that I can trust you to write this story because you'll write it way better than I would.
Wow.
So understanding that God is both just and merciful, and that's the hardest thing. But
That's really good.
Yeah. What about you?
I would say, first of all, and the reason that I think that this is important is because Sophie and I are videographers, cinematographers. We tell stories through the art, through the medium of video often.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that good storytellers know that in order to have like a really good sort of conflict and a juicy story, you need a protagonist and you need an antagonist.
That's true.
And so I would say for everyone who's watching this documentary, you will recognize that they do a really good job of painting the church or painting certain leaders as antagonists. And the truth is, when it comes to the story of life, and everyone will experience this as they mature, the experience of life is that it's not as simple as good guy, bad guy.
So good.
Right? Like it's really easy to, again, dehumanize people by considering them, oh, that's clearly the good guy. That's clearly the bad guy.
Yeah.
The hurt person is the good guy. The person that did the hurting is the bad guy. And there's where the grace or the mercy and justice sort of picture comes into play.
Totally.
So I would say for those who want to know, like, what do I take away from this documentary? I would say don't dehumanize people and make it as simple as that person's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Cancel
Because
culture.
every
That's
single
really good.
every single person struggles with sin. Every single person's going to make mistakes. Some people's mistakes just get publicized for the world to see.
Yeah.
And I would say that there needs to obviously be consequences, and there needs to be justice that happens, and there needs to be a righteousness that rises up within the church to not tolerate that kind of sin within its leadership. But at the same time, don't just discard that person as that's the villain of the story. And it's that simple. Because how would you want someone to respond to you if you made that big of a mistake in your life? It's not that simple. And you would recognize and you would say, like, I'm not evil, I'm not bad. So we have to recognize the complexity of sin in our life and not simply fall into the potential trap of storytelling to say that's the bad guy, because that's not how it works in humanity, in sin and grace, and in the kingdom.
Come on, that is so good. And I think that, like, you were talking about, like, sin, there's no sin greater than another, just some affect people more than they do others. Like, if you're thinking about a pastor that has been watching pornography, you're like, oh my gosh, that sucks. But, like, him and his wife are still together, or like abusing drugs, and it's like, but he just has a problem. It didn't affect anybody, but like him now cheating on his wife has become like this hurt thing. I think pornography and cheating can be kind of close together, but like, just some sins affect humans on earth more, so they feel as if it's greater than another. And that sucks, because the greatest relationship that you have is the one with Christ, and all sin separates you from the Lord. So I think that that's so good. And
Wow.
Yeah.
Deep.
Deep.
We
got
went
deep.
deep today.
But I hope people feel helped by it.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine, just some people who we coach that we get to, pour into their life, feeling like they're kind of floundering or kind of up in the air, trying to figure out where to land after watching something like this. So I hope that this conversation helps people feel like this is where I can kind of land and I can process. I think it's okay and it's mature for believers to take things and process them. And not necessarily say, like, this is my hard stance, my hard conclusion on it.
That's good.
But just say, like, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. I hope people find healing.
Well, thanks for chatting, you guys.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's do this again soon.
Yeah. Let's get back on it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Like Gabe said, we really hope that our time together really has kind of maybe helped like lead some of those wandering thoughts about some of these kind of like hard topics. Leave a comment, leave a like, share this video with somebody. Make sure that you guys are subscribed to We Are the Church, and we'll see you guys next time.